Hello everyone, it's Robert Evans and welcome back to another episode of The Pixel Show. And today we are going to talk about the A7s III and shooting family portraits with it. So come on along. Before we do that, I just want to remind you that all the images in this show are in a smug gallery that you can go access just by clicking the link down below in the description. And that way you can see them closer, you can look at the XF data and all those things. So you just double click on an image, there it is larger, you can click there and get the image details. I just figured by doing it this way and giving you access, it really helps you get a better idea of the quality and answer some of the questions you have that are much harder to do on the video. So anyway, let's get into the show. Okay, so for today's show, that falls under the category of the show's what camera should I get? The reason I call it that is because of course when you go online, there's all these things, well, what camera should I get? And I think the answer to that question is depends on what you shoot. That's why we discuss different cameras, different lenses, things like that. All right, so today, like I said, we're gonna talk about the A7s III and shooting family portraits. Quickly before you do, if this is your first time, I encourage you to go back and watch some of our previous episodes. Here's just three of an example where we did an episode where we feature the 21.8 at night when I was in Las Vegas. There's some tips for shooting great holiday cards, as well as there's a whole series that I did during this COVID vacation that we've all had, where I call it the stories behind my image. And I picked roughly 70, 80 of my favorite images and I put a bunch of episodes together. It's roughly 10, 12 images per episode. And I tell you the stories behind all the different images. So if you choose, go back and watch those. But let's get in and talk about the A7s III. All right, so first off, one of the important things, I'm not going to get into all the technical details about this camera. If you want to do that, I encourage you to go to the Sony site and read them for yourself. But the high ISO is what this camera is known for, and the quality of the file. So this camera goes all the way up to 409,600 ISO and is a full frame sensor, all the way down to 80 ISO. So a lot of low light capabilities in this camera that you can use for all different applications. In still images, this camera is a 12.1 megapixel camera. Now some people may say, well, for a family portrait, that file's not big enough. And you could be right. There are plenty of software and programs out there. Topaz has a great AI where you can upsize the file. But a lot of times when I shoot a family portrait, I'll find out from my couples, like, what are you going to do with them? Are you thinking about wall portraits? Are you thinking about making a book? Do you just want something for your holiday card? Now, this particular family that I'm going to show you images of, I photographed their wedding. This is the third year in a row I photographed their family portrait after they had a son. And they've been loyal, they've been great. And I know that the one thing from past, and again I asked her this year that she's going to do, is she's going to use one of the images for her holiday cards and she's going to make a small little 5x5 book that she gives for herself and gives out as holiday gifts. So I know that I don't need huge files for her, and I wanted to shoot this camera because it's brand new and test it out. The processor is super fast. You know, I'm not going to get technical, but it has the new Bion's XR sensor that's 8 times faster than the previous sensors. The focal points, it has 759 phase detection points, 425 contrast detection points. So the sensor area on this camera, the coverage, the focusing is amazing. I recently used it to shoot sports and swimming indoors, and you could go watch that episode as well. But it was great. The other thing, it shoots 10 frames a second. Now, shooting a family portrait, sometimes we need that, sometimes we don't. I actually prefer to put it on a fast, continuous focus and frames per second, so that if, you know, especially with little kids and they're running around, I can shoot pretty fast and I can catch some decisive moments that otherwise, if I was shooting a single frame at a time, might be harder to get. So 10 frames a second is pretty respectable. Again, if you're shooting sports or something like that, and depending on what you're shooting and the lighting that you're shooting, you know, maybe 10 frames a second isn't going to work. But for this purpose, it was great. And the lens that I used, only one on this particular shoot, was the Sony 135 1.8 G Master. So here's the first image. Now, when I shoot a family portrait, usually one of the first things I like to do is the biggest group. In this case, there's only 3 people. And so what I suggested is like, let him run around a little bit, play with them, let me shoot a few candids. So we picked a location. It's fall, it's beautiful, all the leaves are out. The sun was in and out, so it was a little overcast, a little sunny. But this very first image, I just sort of let them, like a warm-up type of thing. I let them play with him, play with the leaves, and I just shot some nice candid images. Not every portrait session does everybody have to be looking at the camera. In my opinion, I like to let people run around. I like to capture natural images and let them warm up a little bit. So as you can see, I was in an 80 ISO, 640, and shooting wide open. I like shooting wide open in this particular instance because there's a lot of foliage and a lot of trees, and I want to see the color. But I also like the subject to stand out in the image, and by shooting a shallow depth of field, they're really going to stand off the background. The background and the foreground, of course, are going to be out of focus, and the only thing that's going to be in focus are my subjects. The next image is of their little boy. Here it is a little bit bigger. And again, I had him run around, and I was shooting in 10 frames a second, letting him run, and just trying to capture some really nice natural images of him. Again, my settings, like you see, haven't changed much. 800th of a second at 1.8. Here's another image of him, horizontal. Of course, I try to mix up a little bit of verticals and a little bit of horizontal. And he was really a great kid. Sometimes shooting children is difficult, but he was a very happy baby, playing, interacting with me, which was really great. The other thing that I try to do, of course, as well as a family portrait, is get portraits with mom and with dad. So here's a nice portrait with him and his mom. She was holding him, chasing him. Of course, of the hour that I spent with him, I probably shot 300-400 images, and I'm showing you, some of the better 10 or so. But I mean, that's a family portrait session. I mean, not everything you're going to shoot is great. But again, I really like the focus on this camera, continuous focus all the time. Nailed everything. Really, really enjoyed shooting this as a family portrait camera. Now, I also might, consider shooting. I have an A7R IV. If I know my clients are going to want wall portraits or things like that, I'll do that. But again, I was really curious to shoot this camera because it's brand new and I've had very little time with it since I got mine. Now, this image is just a nice little candid image. Of course, he was being a little bit shy and hanging on to his mom, but I'm constantly looking and watching and focusing on the eyes. This has eye autofocus on it, which is great because the little green box just sort of gloms onto their eye the whole time, and I know that my eyes are sharp, which is super important in a portrait. Nothing's more frustrating than getting a great expression or a great portrait back, and then the eyes are just a little bit soft. Here's another image of him having a good time. We kind of changed angles. This is a row of these beautiful red maple trees. I really was trying to get the depth and show that, and this is ultimately what you'll see at the end where I did the family portrait. I really was attracted to this area because of the beautiful redness in the trees and the colors. We also, another thing that's important is we also talked about ahead of time about dress. This is the 3rd time I've done their family portrait, so she knows and she's kind of a little bit familiar with what I like. But again, I have a philosophy: if you're shooting portraits, long sleeve, long pants looks best. Solid colors works best outside, as well as, which we broke the rule here, no labels or logos. But he and his father were in the same thing. I don't think it's that distracting. And ultimately, if I really wanted to take this out, I could do that in Photoshop with the Content Aware tool really quickly. So now here's some images with him and his dad. Dad was holding him and he wanted to pick these leaves. Again, this session was pretty organic. I just sort of let them go and go with it, and I really enjoyed doing this. And again, I stopped down just a little bit 2.0 to make sure that dad and baby were a little bit in focus, but I was also far enough back that I had a little bit more of a depth of field. But I was really after the color of these red leaves. I was sort of doing this shoot around that's what I was gravitating towards. So I made sure I got a nice shot of him trying to pick the leaves, and then him with Dad holding the leaf and smiling, looking at him. There are a few other ones in the Smug Mug Gallery, which again, if you click the link below, you can go see these images from the shoot. But this was a great image of him holding the leaf. You know, had I wish he had a whole leaf in his hand? Absolutely. But great expression of Dad and son, and I think it worked really well. And here we go, the very last image, the family portrait. Like I mentioned, I was looking at that row of trees. I was after the red leaves. Again, shooting at 1.8 at 1,000th of a second. I was back far enough that I wasn't worried about the baby not being in focus or the parents not being in focus. But this is one thing if you're going to shoot wide open, if you have bigger groups and you have depth in your image between subjects, you need to make sure that everyone's in focus. And this is a mistake that you can make if you're shooting at 1.8 and you have 2 or 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet between front and back. Someone's eyes are going to be out of focus, so you have to adjust accordingly. But with the baby sitting on the mom's lap, his head is probably only maybe a foot in front of hers, and I was back far enough because I wanted to include the depth of the trees. Now, one thing that I always look at my work and be like, how could I better this a little bit? And in hindsight, I look at it like, I think maybe if I just crop it a little bit tighter. I like the depth of the trees and the red, but somehow I think the open air or the open space to the right side of the frame could be a little bit, like it pulls your eye over there, and I would actually prefer that just be solid, and then your eye definitely goes right to the subject. Again, we talked a little bit about the logos, so really if I wanted to, I think she dressed them in that, and I think this is like either Lululemon or what's the whale, Nate?
Polo?
Huh?
Polo?
No. Lululemon, the whale is
It starts with an L.
whatever. Lululemon, whatever the logo is. Nate and I are not fashionistas, so we can't figure this out. But my point is I could take the logos off, and then there isn't the distraction of your eyes sort of getting caught up in the white on there. Because everything I want from a portrait, and even talking to my clients about clothes, is I want the attention to go right to the subject's faces and not get lost anywhere else in the frame. So in this picture, in order to improve it, I could take the logos off, I could tighten that crop up so everything goes right to the couple, because of course, as you see, the foreground's out of focus, the background's out of focus, and everything goes right to them. So there's always room for improvement, no matter how good you are as a photographer, or how bad you are, of course. There's always room for improvement. But I always look at my work and say, what could I have done better? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, I remind you, if you want to see the images and examine them closer, go to the link below in the gallery and click on the link. It'll take you to the Smug galleries, and you can view the images all you want. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I really appreciate you watching. This is Robert Evans. Thanks for watching The Pencil Show.